Hi, welcome to Gatecrashers. I'm joined by Jake, as always, and today we're interviewing Dr. Alex Paknadel, writer of Giga, Redfork, and Superstate. How are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you very much. It's been a as I was saying to you before we kind of came on, it's this past 2 weeks has been a rough couple of years.
Oh yeah, we've been talking for. This is the first interview we've had a conversation before actual conversation, so we're going into this on high energy.
Yeah, normally we have a conversation for an hour afterwards.
Yeah, no, it's a nice on ramp.
Yeah, we're just too.
We're tight now.
Yeah. We're like
all
BFFs.
friends.
Yeah,
We're sending each other
getting
Christmas
bracelets.
cards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jake, would you like to take the honors of our first big hard-hitting question?
Ah, yes. So, what is your favorite sandwich?
Oh, Reuben.
Everyone has been saying Reubens recently. What about a Reuben makes it your favorite?
Well, I have to say, like, I think it's just where I have them, you know. So I have this kind of ritual where, like, whenever I'm in the States, I'll seek out, like, you know, deliberately, I'll seek out, like, you know, the Jewish deli to kind of go to. And invariably, you know, they'll have, and for some reason it's like treif, right? So like they'll have like cheese with it, you know, you'll have it with Swiss and stuff. But you know, we have what are called Reubens over here, which is basically just like a horrible, gristly bit of pastrami that's been sort of, you know, sat there for a week in like this sad, soggy white bread. Whenever I come to your great country, I always get something like the size of a football. And I'm not even exaggerating. I had one in Chicago last year, and like, please don't judge me. Like, I literally wept. Like, it was the most beautiful experience of my life. And like I had like a bunch of latkes next to it and everything. And like I was just really being horrible to my body in the most beautiful way imaginable.
Oh yeah, you're the first person who has said they have wept for a sandwich, which is very important to me as a sandwich connoisseur. I can't, like, honestly, I've been telling anyone who will do an interview with us, I offer to buy them dinner or a beer or anything the next time conventions are a thing. Honestly, I think it's just going to be sandwiches from now on.
We're compiling. We have a list.
It's a database.
It is a database, and there will soon be recipes.
Like, honestly though, like, I mean, sorry, I know this is kind of going off piste slightly, but like, this is going to sound really kind of weird, but it is the most civilized meal, right? Like, it's really like handsomely contained, and, you know, it's a functional delivery system. But like everything that happens between those two pieces of bread, man, you know, like anything goes. I love that.
It's beautiful. It's art.
Yeah.
It's
absolutely.
It's just art. And okay, but the prettiness of it, a Reuben is a very messy sandwich. If you get it American style, like stacked. Oh man, I really have to get a Reuben. We have great places in Philly to get them, but like the whole kind of pandemic has made it hard. So I did want to follow up a little bit on your background. I know you've had to probably tell the story a million times. So I'd love to hear a little bit of your too long didn't read backstory, like how you got into getting your comics published.
Okay. I mean, I say it glibly, but like there's a part of me that genuinely believes this. I think I know, like there's a good chunk of nepotism. Frankly, like, I mean, I wish I had a kind of rags to riches story, but like I really don't. I always wanted to make comics, right? Like, I mean, I learned to read with my father taught me to read with Marvel Treasury editions. Like they've been there my whole life. But and I knew I wanted to do it. But like I went and did the PhD and everything, and then I moved back to my university town in about 2005, and I was just out in a bar drinking alone, more of which later. And I met Andy Diggle, who was out with his partner, and we became friends. And God, for about 10 years, right? I was just kind of telling him, we go out to the pub, and I just tell him all of my kind of dumb ideas and stuff. And eventually, I think the spur, like the spur in my flank to actually do something was his tough love, right? Because it got to a point where he just kind of went, look, I'm not going to listen to any of your stupid ideas anymore. Not stupid, I'm not going to listen to any of your ideas anymore. And I said, well, why? And he said, because you never write them down. You talk about them endlessly. You talk a good game. They always sound good, but you never actually commit pen to paper and kind of, put any skin in the game. So one day I did. And, I had studied extensively. I don't think I knew what I was doing necessarily, but what I lacked in talent, I made up for in kind of passion. And then I put together a pitch that I think was broadly passable. And there's the big sort of UK comic convention, not the kind of the big sort of Reed Pop one, but the big kind of local one is called Thought Bubble, right? And Andy and Jock had Will Dennis, who was then group editor at Vertigo, came over to meet Andy and Jock, and I went over to I went to the show with Andy, and he sat me down in front of Will after I'd written this thing down. He sat me down in front of Will and just said, "Look, talk. I'll be at the bar. You guys have a chat." And I was super nervous and everything, but Will is a really disarming guy and put me at my ease, and we had a chat and everything. And he looked it over and he said, "Okay, cool. This is cool. I'll run it past Vertigo editorial." And so I think at times like really amazing people like Greg Lockhart, Shelley Bond, they all liked the pitch, and but it for whatever reason it didn't get passed through. It didn't get past DC. DC top editorial. So I was kind of super bummed, I was Icarus, man. Like I'd flown too close to the sun, and I was cast back down to the depths. I was super miserable for a few days. Anyway, Will rings me out of calls me out of the blue. Says, can you hop on the phone? So I hopped on the phone with him. He said, "All right, like I just just to let you know, I'm not going to be making the move to LA with DC. I'm going to be staying in New York, but I made a few calls, and Bryce Carlson and Matt Gagnon at Boom Studios, I showed them the pitch just on the off chance, and they really liked it. They're going to give you a call." So they gave me a call a day later, and it was all set up, and that was the book that became Arcadia, which came out I think mid 2015, and everything with a few blind alleys, like everything sort of unspooled from there, really. So yeah, that's my kind of secret. Or my secret origin is basically I had a lot of help.
I was reading a bunch of interviews with you just to make sure we didn't ask you the same questions you get every time, and this one has stuck out to me just because of what Andy Diggle said to you. And like I literally wrote this in our notes. I know this story is probably going to give the boot to some listener who needs the kick in the ass to just do the thing and try to do the thing. So very exciting.
That listener is me.
Jake, I'm glad you were listening.
I mean, I come in and out all the time. I mean, I'm just here, man. I just work here.
Horrible pay, I'll tell you that.
Horrible.
So yeah, comics, man. Comics millions.
Yeah, oh yeah. You gotta make it big.
Levi commercials.
So you have been posting for some time about this mysterious pen. And today,
what's going on with this?
When we were before we were about to record, I saw you post about the pen that you bought it. Please tell us what kind of pen it is.
It is a it's a Pilot Decimo capless fountain pen. It's a retractable fountain pen. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Wow.
It's just ridiculous. Like it's insane. You have the click, and everyone loves the click, but then you've got this like rhodium 18 karat gold fountain pen that uses like beautiful, like, oh my god, like I've even got like what's the name of this? That even the name of the ink, right, that I had to get is just beautiful. It's because it's it's just this like exquisite like Japanese engineering and stuff. Oh man, hang on, what is it? Iroshizuku ink, and the name is bamboo charcoal.
What's the name of the actual pen? Did you say
Pilot capless?
It's a Pilot Decimo, and it's a slimmer version of their capless fountain pen. And
I'm looking at the capless one. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's going to change my life. Like everything I write from now on is going to be like a heart-stopping work of incredible genius because of that pen.
It's the pen.
Of course, like.
Oh, Jake, they have it in like a champagne rose gold.
Yeah, no, I was looking at that. I'm like, company pens, Dan. Company pens.
Gatecrashers pens will expense them.
Dude.
To me, you would have to expense it to me, right?
No, we're expensive to Ethan.
Got it. Okay, so let's get into Giga, Jake.
All right.
Giga.
So, what inspired the idea of robots as gods?
I mean, hard to say because I had the idea quite a while ago, but I know I was trying to kind of. Sorry, this is going to sound really kind of. It doesn't sound pretentious. It is pretentious. But what?
You're a doctor. You can be pretentious. It's fine.
What? Yeah, like I have a certificate. Like I have a note for like getting out of PT or something. But no, I was inspired by the. I'm a big fan of like European band Cine, right? And one of the teams I really like is Benoit Peters and Francois Chuitin, and they do a series called The Obscure Cities, right? Which IDW are reprinting right now. I don't really recommend them, like The Leaning Girl, Bruxelles, Walls of Samaris, but they're just they're in these they're these kind of science fiction takes on post-war urbanism, right? So like you have, like there's one called Fever in Urbicon, right, which is about this city where it's got like this rigid kind of class demarcation, right? So like on one side of the river is where like, the lumpen proletariat are kind of kept, and then the other is where the kind of decadent elite is kept. And there's this crystal that just grows into, they never meet, but there's this crystal that just grows into a bridge. And so all of a sudden you start getting this kind of, cultural kind of cross-fertilization and everything. But the thing that I took from that, and the thing that I sort of really wanted to import into Giga, the thing I really loved about it, and that I love about them, is the banality of it, right? It's not, don't get me wrong, they're beautiful to look at, but they're not, but for the protagonists, right, it's just background. And you're kind of presented with these kind of this incredible kind of sci-fi Art Nouveau kind of architecture that just takes your breath away, and they're just going to get groceries. Like that's the thing I really love about it. And with Giga, like I just had this image in my head. I just had this vignette. It was how I discussed it with John. I just had this image of like this dude just walking down the street, and he's not looking up. But standing above him, you just have these silent, immobile robots, and like there's just this cold sunlight kind of lancing between them, and it's like a sort of tenement where you've got like laundry kind of slung between them. And I just described it to him as like just like a canyon of dead robots, and like that's what I wanted to kind of. I built the whole thing out from that. It was just that one central image. I just thought it was just evocative, you know.
I didn't even think of the phrase post-war. Oh, sorry, I just blanked on it. The post-war urbanism. Thank you. And that kind of feeds into our next question, because these dead quote unquote gods, like these robots, are things that are pretty much just like worshipped. Like people live in them. They are the kind of like the microorganisms in a body. How important was it to have that? Like, how did you want that to be structured? To have like a similar belief in like a quote unquote God, but this is like your provider and things like that. How did you set up that world in your pre-write?
Well, honestly, like, I mean, I wasn't setting up anything, you know, I was using stuff that was already at my feet, really. I mean, that's, you know, I guess sort of Abrahamic religion, you know, animistic religions, you're pretty much there anyway, right? Like, I mean, you know, you have water deities, you have mountain deities, you have coyote deities. It's all just kind of there. So there's already this kind of sense that, I mean, that's the big difference, I think, is that, you know, it's kind of like the common or garden, you know, animism that you would find, you know, either, you know, running concurrently with Abrahamic religions or prior to Abrahamic religions, and, you know, anywhere on the planet, except it's applied to an artificial environment instead of a natural one. So instead of worshipping the mountain that nourishes them, they worship the robot that nourishes them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's pretty much, yeah, that's where it came from.
It's such an interesting, and like the designs for the robots, was there anything that you input in on that, or was that the art side of the house that created all those looks?
That was a total collaboration. You know, I mean, you know, John and I discussed it very early on, and you know, we wanted, you know, I mean, John's stuff, not to kind of over egg the pudding, but you know, John's stuff kind of reminds me of a bit of Mobius anyway. So I just said, you know, let's look at a bunch of Mobius, but also we were looking at a lot of social housing, you know, sort of like Soviet high density housing, like projects in US cities, because what, you know, I mean, one of the things that I said, one of the early suggestions that I made to John was, you know, because we have these sort of, you know, there are various kind of sectors in the city, right? So like you have these robots at the center that are very kind of well maintained and, you know, gleaming and what have you. But, you know, once you get out into the kind of the boonies, you know, dilapidated and you know, well cared for and festooned in graffiti and stuff like that. And I said to him, I said, I wanted those ones to sort of look like New York subway cars from the 70s. So there was, you know, there's a lot of kind of back and forth, but, you know, John also kind of imported, I think, very kind of conspicuously a sort of, you know, what you'd expect, right? So like, you know, there's the Neon Genesis in there. There's, you know, there's the Gundam in there. You know, there's you know, there's the bread and butter. You know.
Jake is a Gundam mega fan.
Yeah, I got real into it this year. I'm surrounded by Gundams, but also I want to ask, based on the urban design, did you think about hostile architecture? I can't remember if that's the right term, but you know, just like for the church, will we see parts of their part of like the world as like hostile towards anyone who can't afford to live in one of the robots?
I mean, yeah, I mean that's well. Afford isn't. I mean, the way it's kind of structured is that, or the way we structured it is that there are in groups and out groups, right? It's not necessarily kind of about money. I mean, it's about resources, but not necessarily about money.
About
so what you have is like, yeah, exactly. So if you are not a quote unquote productive member of society, because like the whole thing really is kind of it's a client state, right? Like it's a religious client state. So you have this order of engineer priests called the Order of the Red Relay, who are, they oversee, they're the only ones who are kind of permitted to make repairs on the robots. They're the only ones who are allowed to speak for them. But it doesn't just extend to kind of the ecclesiastical, right? So like they're also the cops. They're also the aldermen, right? Like they're also, they're a cartel. So anyone who doesn't work for them, by definition, is part of an outgroup. And so they have to kind of go out into the very dangerous outskirts of the city and sort of forage for scrap and sort of exchange it for rations. So, I mean, everyone who sort of wants to live in a robot kind of can, but the difference is, in what sort of circumstances are you going to be living in one? So like Evan, our protagonist, I make it fairly kind of abundantly clear, like the one he lives in, I think you see sort of quite clearly in issue 1 is like pretty much a flop house. Right. Mm-hmm. Like he's got like, outside, he's got this tiny little kind of shoebox kind of like studio apartment, whatever you want to call it. Very dilapidated, exposed pipes everywhere. But like he's got people like sleeping in the corridor outside, turning tricks and stuff. I tried to sort of go for like a sort of very dirty magical realism.
My favorite kind.
Ooh, dirty.
I know. I love the grittiness of some series. Like for example, most fans for Star Wars love the Jedi and all that phooey. I like the dark parts of like the Outer Rim, like the Tatooines and things like that. Like getting to see the day-to-day and like how the people who aren't as in the know sort of get to exist. So that's why I think Giga was it like hit so hard, is because that like this is what I'm looking for in my storytelling. And I don't want to spoil anything because it's just a really, really good book. So getting to see that kind of urbanism is really, I think that's what stuck with me. Mm-hmm. So, I know it's a maxi series, right? So 12 issues?
No. We have a 5-issue commitment. And if it does good, we get more. If it doesn't, but you're going to get one complete story in 5 issues. And if it sells as well as it has been selling, and like I'm not saying this like I'm not blowing smoke up my own ass. Like the first issue did pretty good, so if it carries on selling well, then we'll get more.
Yeah, that first issue kind of sold really well, like record breaking, I think, right?
For Vault, yeah. I think like it did. We got a second print, and like I think it ended up doing like quite considerably over 30K. Good. Which, I mean, I remember like the last book I did, Vault, Friendo, because I didn't know what we were looking at before FOC, right? And I spoke to Damien, and I'm British, and I'm a fairly kind of miserable person, so I was kind of I asked him how it was doing, racing for impact. And he just said, "All right, like, so you remember Friendo 1?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, it's out. It's already." He said, "FOC hasn't arrived yet, and it's already outsold Friendo 5-1." I was like, "Oh, but that's not bad news. So what's happening? Why are you not giving me bad news? Am I dreaming? Is something? Am I unwell?" But you know what? Like, I mean, I think one of the things that we sort of benefited from, and I'm not diminishing the input of any of my collaborators in the slightest. They've all, Rosh, Aditya, John, they're all producing kind of career best work in my view. But I think one of the things that we really benefited from was during the lockdown, when like the industry was pretty much paralyzed, and there were all the kind of issues going on with distribution and what have you, and people weren't really sure what sort of shape the industry was going to be in. Adrian at Vault kind of gave me the go ahead to make the announcement, and I think a lot of that kind of initial rush of orders, I think a lot of it was, don't get me wrong, I'm immensely proud of the book. I think it's a great book. I think it's one of the best things I've ever worked on. But I think one of the reasons why it caught the way it did is because people took it as a sign of confidence in the industry itself. You know what I mean? That it was that it was coming back. You know, it was. I think we were one of the first books from a mainstream or mainstream adjacent publisher to sort of come out of the gate and go, no, this is going to be in your store. Look forward to it. You know, I think people were.
I do. You know, I hadn't got to ask anybody this yet. I do want to go. This is more for Dan than anybody else. How is it working with Adrian? Is he editing the book?
Yeah.
How is that? Because I love. If you have never seen my Twitter, I'm deeply in love with Vault and close with the people over there. I just want to know how it is working with them as a publisher.
I mean, honestly, he's a monster, you know. I don't know how he sleeps. I saw a Zoom thing he did the other day, right, where he had like a mustard and cream tablecloth behind him, and he was wearing a mustard and cream shirt. So he was color coordinated with his own tablecloth, and I was just like, I can't trust this person.
Yeah, no, he'll come out of anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, yeah. So, yeah, no, he's great, man. They're great. It's I drive him nuts. I do drive him nuts because I have it's not the same when I work on sort of corporate stuff, but when it's my stuff, I'm very reluctant to let it go out the door until I'm absolutely happy with it. And so it's very difficult to kind of prize an issue out of my fingers to get it to the printers. Because, when it's not what it's like, Marvel or Valiant or whatever, because that's not my IP. But when it's out of my head, you have to prize it from my cold dead fingers to get it out of the door. It's rough. He's very patient.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I've never really gotten into the that extent of creator-owned questions. So let's say Giga does really well. This is a self-contained story. If it does well, you would like to do more.
Oh yeah, and we're ready to go. I say it's self-contained. It ends with, I'm not cauterizing the stump at the end of issue 5. It definitely leads elsewhere, but it's going to be one of those things where you can, that baton can be picked up, or we can just do something else kind of set in that universe, right? I've got a whole kind of series Bible just percolating away in my head, it's a funny thing, man. A lot of people say, they compliment me on my world building, which I always, because I will always look for the negative in anything. I always go, well, I work really hard on character stuff too, but there is something I think nice about leaving sandboxes, right? So, and I look at a lot of my creator-owned stuff, and I think Friendo was the only real sort of bounded one. I think the others, all of them, like Arcadia, Turncoat, they all have scope to become, they're all sort of sandboxes in waiting, and I can kind of go back to them anytime I want,
Yeah.
So you mentioned creator-owned versus corporate stuff. Let's go into the corporate stuff for a little bit. So this is a question from one of our team members. How much of the story of Assassin's Creed Uprising was played out by Ubisoft, however they pronounce it? Were you and your co-writer, Dan Waters, able to still tell the story that you wanted to tell?
Yeah. No, we absolutely were. they took direction from us rather than the other way around. Like Ubi is, Ubi's very. I think they have a very kind of they're very open to a sort of additive perspective on their world, right? So as long as we didn't, it was basically kind of, it was a back and forth with Anouk over at sort of Ubi licensing, just to make sure that we weren't sort of treading on anybody else's canon, right? So like, Dan and I kind of went into it and we just said, well, hang on, what if, you have, Otso Berg and, he basically has to team up with some assassins, you do it as an odd couple thing. And, we were expecting a huge amount of pushback on that, because it's sort of verboten. And instead they just went, yeah, cool. You can use these characters. We'd appreciate it if you did. Off you go. And, beyond that, it was Liberty Hall. We were quite taken aback with how much freedom they gave us.
And have you been, I'm not going to ask you about continuity, but have you been a fan of the series? Or was it something you came to fresh?
It wasn't something that came to fresh. I mean, because I'm old and it's in the cultural groundwater. So I played games. But it wasn't something I was passionate about. And then sort of having to negotiate those passions, I think was, that was something that, Dan and I kind of hadn't been kind of prepared for. I mean, but one of the things we found as well was that, there was, there are various, it's such an active fan community and it's such an active kind of critical community, Assassin's Creed, that it's something that I think that, I'm not kind of calling out comics here at all. I think I don't know whether it's unique to that franchise or whether it's video games or whatever, but instead of, we'll find the critical reaction from the fans isn't deconstructive, it's constructive. So, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I've had, mainstream work or corporate work where the objective of any reading has been to basically kind of, not to shit on it, right? Like to sort of, that isn't what I would do. That wasn't my kind of head canon. How dare you? You suck. I hope you fall in the sea. All that sort of stuff. Whereas one of the things that I found with Assassin's Creed was that the fans were kind of coming back and they were going, "Oh right, I can't quite make sense of how this kind of plugs into I can't quite figure out how this kind of plugs into Assassin's Creed 3. So, if you don't mind, like I took the liberty of drawing, of writing like a bridging narrative, and you go like, what? They're filling it in for you as they go along. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. It's just this totally, it's completely organic, and they're just kind of, they're like, don't get me wrong, we did our due diligence and we checked everything off, but at the same time, you've got the fans kind of, it's almost like they're willing you to succeed. They're like backfilling this continuity stuff for you.
That is like so knowing the comics world, that is super wholesome comparatively.
Right?
That's so not like, they're not like, oh, you suck because you didn't do this. They're like, hey, you inspired me to do this thing.
Yeah, or even just by the way, if you hit a road bump here, just beware. Here are some sharp coral reefs here, so you might want to avoid them. But just generally, kind of, like, I think because Ubi are very kind of open with the story world, mm-hmm. I think a lot of the fans kind of view themselves, not in an arrogant way at all, but like they just view themselves as like, they almost view it as like an open source community. And it was honestly, it was lovely. Like, it was just really nice. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like there were people who hated what we were doing and probably still do. But in the main, we just found that people were just kind of helping us out. And, they were kind of going to all the kind of wikis and like updating them and making sure that they reflected the changes that we'd made. And yeah, it was lovely.
That's like, especially, that is so nice hearing, like, because like, sometimes someone will make Batman do something and then the entire internet will break down. Yeah. Whoa, this character's made up, right? But good. You know, that is a super wholesome answer. Very so I'm so glad about that.
Yep.
So with your collaborators are MV and Dan Waters, right? That's how you say his name?
Yeah, and Ryan O'Sullivan.
Okay. So Ramvi and Dan are writing in the Future Slate and at DC. Do you have do you have any plans, or would you like to do work at DC?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I don't have plans. They know where I am.
They know where to find you.
But I mean, I know what those guys are doing, because we all, you know, we all kind of show each other our stuff. So, you know, I know what they're up to, and you know, I give you and your listeners official permission to be excited. There's a lot more kind of coming down the pike, that I think that I think is, you know, people are going to go wild, I think.
We didn't send you these questions beforehand, but you gave us a perfect segue into the next one. I know we're not supposed to talk about perfect segues like as interviewers, but I'm so excited when people do it. So Jake.
Yeah. So with White Noise, how often do you brainstorm your own ideas with the group?
All the time. Yeah, all the time. I mean, you know, some things, yeah, people, you know, we don't workshop everything. I would say, I mean, Ryan's probably a bit more private with his stuff. It's more kind of, you know, here is what I've already produced for your, you know, for your delectation. So we'll tend to sort of see that as it's sort of on the way out the door. I'm a lot more needy, so like, I mean, I'll you know, I'll call Dan and Ram at like 2:00 in the morning to help me fix a story problem, or, you know, Ram will ring me on a Sunday and we'll kind of thrash out, you know, theme stuff. But no, I mean, we are. It's an interesting dynamic we have, you know, because it's sort of, you know, there is an element of competition, you know, not in terms of sales or, you know, being sort of radio friendly unit shifters, but just in terms of, you know, challenge accepted, right? Like, so, you know, if someone really drops a mic, then, you know, yeah, you know, you know that you have to kind of raise your game. And I think that you know, but it's within this sort of understood kind of crucible of friendship, so it never gets ugly. And I think we all just kind of make better work as a result. You know, we're all kind of growing together. And yeah, sorry, I mean, it sounds very kind of kumbaya, but yeah, it works really well, you know.
But going with that, because you're all kind of buddies and you're like this group, and that's all incredible. But do you seem like when you're giving each other feedback, do you not pull any punches that you would normally with someone you're not as close with your constructive criticism to help each other become better?
No, I mean, it can be quite brutal. But again, that's fine, because it's all in this kind of crucible of love. So I mean, like Ram in particular doesn't sugar any pills, right? And my stuff is incontrovertibly better as a result. Because he'll, you know, he don't get me wrong, you know, he won't like rewrite stuff for me, but he'll just go, no, that doesn't work, and this is why.
So you're more like, you know, each other's limits, so you can actually be like, hey, this doesn't work, here's an idea.
Well, who's helped if you sugarcoat everything? You know, whose career is advancing, you know, because that's the thing. I mean, it's the way we kind of looked at it very early on is that it's a layer of editorial before it ever reaches editorial. So it's already basically been through a think tank before it even gets out the door.
That's why it's so polished.
Well, I mean, thank you for saying so, but if that is true, then yes.
Yeah. So for think tanks, how much creative control did you have when you were working on Lords of Empire specials?
A lot, actually. It was interesting. The really, I mean, the briefs I got for the two specials were from Al, and it was he wanted, one that sort of went into Sequoia's backstory, and one that went into the swordsman's backstory and would kind of fill in the gaps. Because the Empire crossover, the main event book, by definition, it had to be the sort of widescreen cinematic experience that everyone was paying their money for, right? So, but I kind of had the best gig in the house, as I see it, because I got to do the kind of the nuanced character stuff. And I remember just saying to Al very early on, I said, can I just take these two people on their worst day? Because that gives me that sharpens so many of my kind of weapons as a dramatist. And he went, yeah, absolutely. So I just kind of got to put these two characters through this kind of emotional ringer in a really satisfying way, and leave all the kind of pyrotechnics to everybody else, which suits me fine,
Were you familiar with the the Celestial Messiah and Swordsmaster before you started on these?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like I grew up with this shit, man. Like it was, on my father's knee. It was, I was more, my dad was more a kind of Roy Thomas kind of Engelhart, Roy Thomas Stalin guy, growing up. But I was familiar with the Engelhart stuff, and I'd read the Engelhart stuff. I had to refamiliarize myself with a lot of it, and there were some continuity issues that I had to deal with, because the Mantis character is really interesting, man, because you file the serial number off, and because Engelhart wasn't. He had to abandon some character strands that he'd sort of set up. And so he just ported the character over to DC and gave him a different name. So Mantis, I think, has appeared in with the serial number filed off. She's appeared in 3 different companies. So I had to diligently ignore the stuff that happened at DC and focus on the Marvel stuff, because obviously, that's the IP. And so, but that actually gave me a lot of freedom to kind of fill in the gaps, So I wasn't trying to kind of ape Engelhart, because I think that's really deep, disrespectful. But what I wanted to do was, it's that thing. I think a good retcon, won't do any violence to the original. If you look at what sort of Alan Moore did with the anatomy lesson, right? The famous sort of Swamp Thing issue where he realizes that, he's not a guy covered in plant matter. He's actually a plant that thinks it's a guy. What I think is really interesting about that, and I'm not for a second suggesting that what I did is anything close to that, but the lesson I took from that is that if you want to do any kind of retcon, never ever do violence to the original. Always treat the original with respect. You're not trying to tear down any walls. You're just trying to add an extra room. So that was really what I tried to do with those one shots, is to leave the Engelhart stuff, most of which people love this stuff. They're extremely passionate about it, and I strove to do no violence to that. What I really wanted to do was to just say, well, hang on, if you place the camera kind of over here, then you can also look at it from this perspective. So that's what I tried to do with that. And within the sort of Celestial Messiah one in particular, I was doing kind of, I went back and I've over a weekend, I just sort of inhaled 20 years worth of Avengers continuity. And so I ended up sort of writing what amounted to I imagine there was DVD cutscenes from sort of issues from 1973 and stuff. And I just wanted to sort of treat it as an intertext that would just sort of provide a different spin on events that you'd already seen.
That's you were essentially putting insulation in the house, you were filling in those gaps that we're not intentionally left there, but you could find other ways to give context, which is such an interesting way to approach. Especially, I loved how you framed "Never Do Violence to the Original." Like, I really like that, because like a lot of people destroy the sandbox they're playing in and just like, all right, everybody, figure it out.
Well, not being funny, right? But like, I mean, this is gonna sound really kind of haughty, and I don't mean for it to. But where's the skill? If you're just going to take a wrecking ball, where's the skill?
Yeah, it's so much easier to get a fine tooth and comb. It's not easier.
Yeah,
it's better.
Just as a sort of intellectual exercise, you know, can I sort of place what I'm doing in dialogue with this thing without and you know. Can I remove the tablecloth without, you know, disrupting any of the kind of glassware?
Yeah, I mean, you got to pull really quick.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about Redfork a little bit, but Jake has not read it, and he extremely doesn't want to hear anything about it because he's very excited to read. So he does have a question he does want to ask before he mutes himself.
Now, normally this is the last question, but if you had to make a Rube Goldberg machine, what would its purpose be?
I'm trying to think of sort of gaps in my life, convenience gaps in my life. You know what? This is gross. Like, it would cut my toenails.
Awesome.
Yeah, like I don't want anything to do with them. They're appalling. Like, what, you know?
That is a.
Why do I need claws on my feet?
That needs to be so precise.
Yeah, but like, why do I need claws on my feet? I don't climb trees.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous.
You got to get out there.
Yeah.
Dan, he is a professor.
He's a doctor. His doctor's outside climbing trees.
Professor Monkey Man now.
So, Redfork is your new book from TKO. It is in the third wave of their books, which is, so far I've read yours and all of the shorts, and they've all been incredible, so I'm excited to get into the rest of them. But Redfork it's a lot. And it's a story kind of set in small town America. And it's a very specific flavor of Americana. What did you do to kind of bring realism to that? Like, what kind of research, how did you learn about like a mining town and things like that?
Honestly, just a whole heap of reading and a whole heap of documentaries, right? Because I mean, it's not somewhere that I could kind of. Maybe I should have done a research trip. In fact, I almost certainly should have. But I tried to kind of soak in as much as I could just from credible sources, right? Yeah, did a bunch of reading, watched a bunch of documentaries. I mean, of course, you know, the illusion of objectivity in documentary is something. But another thing that another sort of layer of insulation, right, was I paid James Maddox, who's a local writer, to basically go over my scripts and just kind of effectively kind of it's interesting because, like, you know, I hired a sensitivity reader for Giga, right? Because like I have, you know, a black disabled protagonist, right?
Oh, can we we'll dig into that later, because I wanted to ask about that, didn't know how. You were the one who asked for Danny to be the sensitivity reader?
Yeah.
Oh, that's very important. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, no, like it's, you know, if you're going to step out, I don't agree that people have to stay in their lane, but I think if you're going to leave your lane, you have to be careful, right? It's just, because otherwise you're, and you know, it's not a kind of, it's not about being pious. It's about removing barriers to accessibility, as I see it, right? It's about, I don't want anything between, I don't want to get between the text and the reader. So, you know, I want to disappear as much as possible. So in order to kind of, you know, in order to sort of, you know, be as little of an impediment to sort of, you know, appreciation of the story that I want to tell as possible, then it just makes sense to me that, you know, you would sort of, you know, put it to the floor. You know, it's not writing by committee, far from it. It's just, you know, someone kind of going through a script and saying, look, you know, you can keep that if you want, but you need to know that, you know, there are going to be some people who may find that objectionable. and it's it's cool, but there it is. All I'm going to do is I'm going to delineate the pothole for you. It's up to you whether you drive into it, which is fair enough, right? Like I think that's perfectly fair. But I actually, but people keep asking me about that, but I actually had one for Redfork as well, and that was James. James is a very fine writer in his own right. And he just kind of went through and because I wanted to kind of nail the local detail, and I mean, don't get me wrong, like I know like it's a big state and what have you, and people are still gonna, it's still not going to kind of ring, it's still, there are still going to be authenticity issues for a number of people, and I'm absolutely prepared to eat that, but I just wanted there to be like plausible, like verisimilitude, what I mean, for because otherwise it's another, I think like the thing I found really instructive was like it was just all the accounts that I was hearing about. You remember like back at the start of the last decade, like everyone in Detroit started getting locals in Detroit started getting really, really kind of honked off with like misery tourism.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just like people kind of going like, oh, like it's a post-capitalist, like urban, blastscape and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, dude, people live here. You know what I mean? Like show some respect. Like it's, yeah, all right. Like, oh, it's so fascinating. This place has been reclaimed by urban prairie and that like there are 70 fires a night. Like, yeah, dude, people live here. Like you can't, it's not, don't get off your tour bus. You know what I mean? Give them some like, anyway. But I don't know whether obviously, it's narrative, and narrative is by definition tendentious, right? Like it has a view. I'm definitely taking a position, but in as to the best of my ability, I wanted to be like respectful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, as we spoke about before the show, I don't have any experience with mining towns, but we grew up in a waterman town where there were crabbing and things like that. Cause Jake still lives on an island in the Chesapeake Bay. So like it was a very small town. The biggest thing we had was a Kmart, and like people, this was their jobs, like their lives. And it's become a little bit more, honestly gentrified since. Like there's more stuff there, but like those industries are still really hurting because like overfishing and things like that. So like a lot of people's livelihoods are on the line. So you do deal with a lot of sort of fallout from that, and coping in different ways, which I think is for me personally was a huge something the story got very on the nail on the head. So I don't want to mine too far into spoilers. You're welcome for the mine pun. On Redfork, but I did want to talk about the themes of addiction.
Please, yeah.
With the story, and personally coming from a place who I have lost a lot of friends, and see people struggle with heroin, especially, and all those types of like different drugs and drinking and things like that. The story doesn't portray these people who are dealing with this in a negative light, like many pop culture things do, which is very detrimental to people struggling with this, because I asked you at the top of the show, but I completely forgot his friend, A-Rod?
D-Ray.
He's living a normal life, but he is dealing with addiction. He's like, you meet his dog and he is a lovable, normal person. And I think that sort of dynamic of everyone deals with their stuff, like everyone's dealing with something, so don't put them in this light. How did you wow, there's a lot. How did you go about writing in a way that didn't sort of vilify addiction and things like that?
Well, I mean, honestly, there's some personal experience in there. I mean, like I'm a long time ago, but like I'm a recovering addict, right? Of various things. And I don't know whether I was, it's possible that I was kind of giving myself an easy ride. I don't know. But I certainly, most of the time, and I think this is certainly true of most drugs, but like I think particularly like alcohol and heroin, you know, these things are painkillers, right? Like, so logically, in order for people to get into that lifestyle, right, like they're addressing a pain, right? And I just think surely, you know, hopefully this doesn't sound too kind of, you know, hippy dippy, but like the kernel of empathy, right? The beginning of empathy is the recognition that other people have pain, right? That's where it begins. Is, you know, okay, the other feels as I feel. And so what does condemning it achieve? It doesn't help them. It doesn't help us. And so, yeah, like, I mean, you know, I don't think it was particularly transgressive or anything, but I just want, again, it was from everything that I'd read, you know, these are kind of communities, and, you know, we have them over here as well, but, you know, we have communities where these things are, you know, they're ambient, you know, they're as commonplace, you know, drugs are as commonplace as like turning on a light switch, you know, or like fire hydrants. And, you know, because they're kind of, you know, dependence as furniture, I guess, would be how I would sort of articulate it. And so I wanted to sort of depict that as kind of unremarkably, I guess, as possible. Does that answer your question in any way?
Absolutely. I think not making it a big deal, if like in layman's terms.
I mean, like it is a big deal, right? But like at the end of the day, like but at the end of the day, like, you know, it's like what? Yeah, these you know, lives are kind of blighted by this stuff, but by the same token, that's not everything that kind of happens, is it? It's
their struggle is not a mirror of their worth. Like, it doesn't, just because they're dealing with something doesn't mean they're worth less. And I think the story captures that in a very
100%. Because like otherwise, you know, I think like everyone who struggles with addiction, the fundamental thing you struggle with at all times is worth, right? Is a sense of self-respect. You know, do I respect my body? Do I respect myself enough to not do this? You know, do I respect the people who love me enough to stop it? And I mean, that's a very difficult, that's actually a very kind of loaded question. And I maybe should walk that one back a bit, because sometimes people, you know, it's a physiological thing, right? It's not necessarily a kind of question of love. But certainly, I mean, I can say like viscerally, right? Like from my own experience, you know, the reason I stopped was I had basically, I'd burned through all of my lifelines, right? You know, the people who loved me were no longer wanting to engage with me. And that was my wake up call, right? Like, and I know that like other people's mileage varies, right? But it was interesting sort of, you know, as the dust was kind of settling and just kind of going, well, I guess I'm a bad person then, you know, for kind of putting other people through this kind of terrible thing. And then, you know, having people, again, those same people who love you kind of turning around and saying, well, like you were sick, which is, you know, I guess like, I don't want to get too kind of romantic about it, but, you know, as close as I think, you know, you get in a sort of secular world to sort of absolution, I guess.
Yeah. We talked more about this at length before the episode, so I agree.
Yeah. Sorry. This is like we're catching up.
Yeah. I think it's a very, you captured a very important light on this. And it hit me very close to home in a good way, where most media portrayals of addiction like this kind of not vilifies, but makes it seem like they're the bad guy. And this does not do that. So thank you for that. But I don't
know. I mean, thank you for sort of responding to it that way. Like, I mean, it's, I hope that was how it would be received.
Yeah. And I can't leave us on such a dark question. So this is mild spoilers, but there are a lot of references to the Insane Clown Posse in Redfork. What's that about? What do you got there?
You know what? Like, I think it was just because they're largely kind of confined to like one character. And again, I think it was just it was a whimsical thing, because again, I think it was about sort of mischaracterizing people. And I think what did it was because you remember there was that whole thing like a while ago where I think the sort of the meeting of the Juggalos and everything, and they were certainly like about 5 years ago. Those guys were kind of ridiculed, and all this kind of Fago stuff, and magnets. How the hell did they work? And it became kind of a meme. And I know there's the guy who kind of jumps on barbed wire and everything, and it's all kind of
superhuman.
Superhuman, yeah.
Sorry, I never thought I'd get to talk about him in an interview.
There you go.
Have you? Let's talk.
But sorry, super quick. But before, I think it was a couple of years ago. A friend of mine pointed out that they were actually they were taking on fascists, man. They were kind of going to DC, and they were kind of they were
Juggalo March.
But it's explicitly like against the alt-right, and I was like, man, there's been I have to say, like a sort of a liberal snobbery about these people, and they're doing the work, man. So that was another thing. I was like, okay, well, I'm no, screw it. Like, I'm going to make one of them like the hero. Cool.
Yeah, so I was super. I've never been a fan of Insane Clown Posse as a listener, but I have been so infatuated and interested in the culture. And as you said, where they all meet up is called The Gathering. And there's a couple really good documentaries. They're YouTube documentaries about them. If you haven't seen them, I'll send them. But
please, yeah.
It's this place where people who don't feel like they belong to have somewhere to belong and have a family. A lot of them are dealing, from what I have researched and things like that, a lot of them do struggle with addiction, self-worth, and things like that. And this Insane Clown Posse has given them a home and a reason to do their best and fight for good. And it's as you said, it's like this liberal snobbery of like making fun of these people, but these people are absolutely doing the work. Like, they're doing it now. They've been doing I know they've been doing live streams or something like that where all the money goes to people out of work and things like that. It's just like it's wild that the Juggalos are an absolute force for good. On the most part, I can't speak for any outliers or things like that, but it's just there's always groups. But like, I've always been interested in them. I double majored psych and anthropology, and like I really wanted to write a paper or like go to the gathering as like a researcher. But I absolutely think it's such an interesting world that no one really talks about. So it was cool seeing that, because one of my very specific interests. So whoop whoop to you. I think that's going to be one of the only interviews you get to do.
I am worried about that kid.
Which one?
Like Superhuman.
So for people who don't know, this kid is in his backyard and he stands on a table, looks directly at the camera, and this one's for my Juggalos and Juggalettes, whoop whoop, and then he backflips onto what would be it, broken glass, toy cars, barbed wire, like tables, all the time. And he's kind of made a name for himself. I don't know if he makes money from it, but I do worry about him, because that.
Well, like he's not like shredded. Like, this is not like a big dude. Like, this is like, he's a kid, man. And like, yeah. I don't know. Like, I feel very kind of like protective towards him.
I love Superhuman. I just
want him to be okay,
Yeah. Yeah, it's just ICP has a lot of roots in backyard wrestling.
Okay. I'll say like he knows how to fall and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if he technically does, but he's done stuff with their local wrestling group or wherever he's at. Yeah, a lot of this is really off the beaten track, but a lot like there was a time in the U.S. where backyard wrestling was like a very, very big thing, and to be fully candid with you, the person that I lost to heroin was a huge Insane Clown Posse fan. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
No, oof, I didn't think that would hit. So no, I'll push through. He bought this game, the little backyard wrestling home video game, and the Insane Clown Posse was in it. So that's my first experience with them as a kid. So understanding backyard wrestling, these people would throw each other off of roofs onto tables full of barbed wire. They would just set up their their rings just in the backyard. People would just come, drink Faygo, 40s, just get completely hammered and just watch each other beat each other up. It's such a unique sliver of I don't know if it's international, but America itself. But these people, like, after like the matches, they're just good friends. Like, I don't know. It's such an interesting world.
I mean, like, if you've like pulled like sharp metal barbs out of someone's face, I imagine you're pretty close by the end of it.
Yeah, and it's just it's all very, and it's especially because there's no real referees. There's no one really kind of regulating this. It's just a wild world. I don't know if they still do it, especially in the COVID times, but it is worth looking into. I'll send you those Juggalo.
No, please. I'd be fascinated.
Yeah, I would. Oh, man, it's something that I'm super into. Not as I just love the idea of community, because my entire thing is building communities and opening doors. I really think I might have to do a Juggalo episode of this show.
Let me know.
Yeah, we'll start our own Juggalo podcast. Not as Juggalo. I mean, we could. We'll get into that after the episode. But thank you for coming on. This was a heck of an episode. Where can people find you, and what should they be picking up right now?
Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, I'm on Facebook for my sins. I don't know for how much longer, because it does seem to just be like horrible. I'm on Twitter, just at Alex Paknadel, AlexPaknadel, where I talk rubbish a lot, with occasional digressions into comics. In terms of what I got out at the moment, so the Road to Empire trade should be coming out from Marvel, I think, at the end of this month, which contains both of my Empire tie-in one-shots, which can be read independently, but I'm very, very proud of them. There's Lords of Empire, Celestial Messiah, and Lords of Empire Swordsman. I hope people like them. There's also coming out currently. There's a mini series from Vault called Giga, which we mentioned earlier on in the show. Redfork from TKO, I think, dropped just this last Monday. I don't know when this is out, but that was dropped Monday 9th. And I'm very, very proud of that. I've also got, if you keep your eyes peeled, through Z2 Comics, if any of you are fans of the band, I've co-written a graphic novel with him called Superstate. With the guitarist Graham Coxon, called Superstate, which that should drop. Another co-writer on that is Helen Milan as well. She's immense. Yeah. Beyond that, I've got a bunch of stuff in train. Can't really talk about it. I can. Yeah, I'm doing something with Caspar Wingard, who a bunch of Dr. Aphra. A bunch of Dr. Aphra issues. He's great. We're working on a thing, having a lot of fun with that.
Interesting. So, thank you for coming on. You can find us.
Thank you for having me.
Find us at GayCrashersPod on Twitter and GayCrashersPod on Instagram, and on our website, which we will link in the bio. See you guys next week.
Gay Crashers.